Hotels are meant to be places of comfort and rest. But what if the room you're staying in has a past far darker than you could imagine? From eerie whispers to ghostly figures, these are 5 terrifying true hotel horror stories that will make you think twice before checking in. Before we begin, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more spine-chilling stories, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a scare. And let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? Now, let's dive into the darkness. The road stretched long and empty before me, swallowed by the darkness of the night. My eyes were heavy, my body aching from hours behind the wheel. The gas station attendant had warned me there weren't many places to stop this far out, but I didn't have a choice. I needed sleep before I veered off the road and became another cautionary tale. That's when I saw it, the neon sign flickering weakly in the distance. Pinewood Motel. It looked like something out of an old crime novel, the kind of place where people checked in but didn't always check out. But beggars can't be choosers. I pulled into the lot, gravel crunching beneath my tires. The office light was on, but barely. Inside, an old man sat behind the counter, his wrinkled face illuminated by the dull glow of a desk lamp. "Room for the night?" I asked, my voice hoarse from exhaustion. He looked me up and down, like he was sizing me up for something. Then, after a long pause, he nodded. "Room 12, he muttered, sliding a key across the counter. His fingers lingered on it for a second too long. "Checkout's at 10. That was it. No pleasantries. No warnings. Just that eerie stare that made the back of my neck prickle. I took the key and hurried out, eager to get some rest. The room smelled of mildew and something stale, like old wood and forgotten things. The wallpaper was peeling at the corners, and the carpet had stains I didn't want to think too hard about. A single dim lamp buzzed in the corner, casting long shadows that made the place seem smaller than it was. I locked the door behind me, dropped my bag, and collapsed onto the bed. The mattress sagged under me, but at least it was a place to lay my head. My body was ready to shut down, but as I drifted into that strange space between sleep and wakefulness, I heard it. Whispering. At first, I thought it was the wind slipping through a crack in the window. But it wasn't. The sound was too distinct, soft, hurried voices speaking just out of reach, like someone murmuring into my ear, but not quite close enough to understand. I sat up and turned on the lamp. The whispers stopped. I scanned the room. The closet door stood slightly ajar, but there was nothing unusual inside. I stepped into the hallway, half expecting to find a couple of night owls chatting outside my door. But the corridor was empty, stretching on in eerie silence. The other rooms were dark, their occupants, if there were any, fast asleep. I shrugged it off and went back inside, locking the door behind me. Maybe it was just my exhausted brain playing tricks. I shut off the light and pulled the blanket up to my chin. Then the whispers started again. This time they were frantic, urgent, like a dozen voices speaking over each other, struggling to be heard. They swirled around me, filling the room like an invisible crowd. My heart pounded. The air felt thicker, heavier, as if something unseen had crept inside with me. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay still to listen. Maybe it was the vent? The pipes? But no, it was right beside me. A breath, cold and damp, brushed against my cheek. My stomach turned to ice. I reached out with a shaking hand and fumbled for the lamp. The moment the light flickered on, the whispering stopped. And then I saw it. On the bed beside me, the sheets were pressed down in the shape of a body. The indentation was deep, as if someone had just been lying there. But there was no one. I shot off the mattress, so fast I nearly tripped over my own feet. My pulse hammered in my ears. The whispering didn't start again, but the room suddenly felt suffocating, like the walls were closing in. I wasn't alone. I grabbed my keys and ran. I spent the night in my car, parked under the lone streetlight outside the motel. Every time I closed my eyes, I swore I could hear the faintest murmur of voices creeping through the cracks in my windshield. But I refused to look back at the motel. At sunrise, I went inside to return the key. The old man at the desk barely looked up. "Checkout's at 10, he repeated in that same dull tone. I hesitated, the words bubbling in my throat. Did he know? Had anyone else heard the whispers? Instead, I just said, "Room 12, is it haunted?" The man's hand stilled on the counter. He exhaled through his nose, slow and deep, before finally meeting my eyes. Room 12's been empty for a long time. A chill skittered down my spine. I held up the key. Then, whose room was I in? For the first time, his expression changed. A flicker of something crossed his face, regret maybe, or sorrow. It was hers, he said quietly. The whispers, the cold breath, the unseen body beside me. I felt a lump form in my throat. I didn't ask anything else. I just placed the key on the counter and walked out. As I drove away, I glanced at the rearview mirror one last time. The neon sign flickered weakly. The shadows behind the motel windows stretched long in the morning sun. And just as I turned onto the highway, I heard it again. A whisper. This time, it came from the back seat. I travel a lot for work. It's a lonely kind of life, bouncing from hotel to hotel, where the beds all feel the same and the carpets hold the smell of hundreds of strangers who came before you. I've stayed in fancy places with chandeliers in the lobby and cheap motels with flickering neon signs that buzz through the night. But this hotel, this one was different. The moment I walked in, something felt wrong. Maybe it was the air, thick with the scent of fresh paint and something artificial, like an attempt to cover up something else. Maybe it was the way the front desk clerk barely made eye contact, sliding the key across the counter with a forced smile. Or maybe it was just the mirror. The room was too perfect. Not in the way that luxury hotels are supposed to be, with their spotless sheets and fluffed pillows. This was a different kind of perfect. Unnatural. Like someone had set the stage for a performance, but no one was actually supposed to use it. And then there was the mirror. It took up the entire wall across from the bed, floor to ceiling, gleaming. The kind of mirror that makes you uncomfortable, because you can't escape it. I stared at myself in it for longer than I should have. My face looked strange, stretched slightly by the glass. My eyes were tired, my clothes wrinkled from hours of travel. But it was still me. I turned away. I didn't like the way it made me feel. I went about my usual hotel routine, ordered room service, took a shower that lasted too long, and settled into bed with the TV humming softly in the background. I wasn't tired. My body ached, but my mind wouldn't shut off. And then I noticed something. My reflection was still staring at me. It should have been watching the TV, like I was. But its eyes were locked onto me, like it knew I had noticed. I sat up. So did it. I waved my hand. So did it. Everything was normal. It must have been my imagination. I turned off the lamp, rolled onto my side, and closed my eyes. And then sometime after midnight, I woke up. I don't know what stirred me. Maybe the silence. The TV was off, though I didn't remember turning it off. Maybe the heavy feeling in the air, like the weight of the room had shifted while I slept. My mouth was dry. I needed water. I sat up slowly, groggy, rubbing my face. And then I looked up, and my reflection was still lying down. My chest tightened. I blinked, convinced I was seeing things. But there it was, me, still stretched out on the bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. Not asleep. Not even blinking. Just watching. I swallowed, my throat clicking. I raised my hand. My reflection did nothing. I turned my head. And that's when it turned its head too, slowly, mechanically, until its empty, unblinking eyes met mine. And then it smiled. It was the wrong kind of smile. The kind that stretched just a little too far, that revealed too many teeth. The kind that didn't belong on my face. My stomach twisted into knots. My hands clenched the sheets. The room felt colder. And then my reflection began to sit up. I don't remember making the decision to run. My body took over before my brain could catch up. I lunged for the door, fumbling with the lock, my fingers clumsy with panic. Behind me, I heard a soft creak, the sound of the bedsheets shifting. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I yanked the door open and bolted. I spent the night in the hotel lobby. I sat in one of those oversized chairs near the front desk, arms wrapped around myself, staring at every reflective surface with suspicion. The glass windows, the polished floors. Every time I caught a glimpse of myself, I expected to see something wrong. I didn't go back to the room. At sunrise, I approached the front desk. The woman working the night shift had been replaced by someone new, someone older, with deep lines in his face and tired eyes that had probably seen too much. "I want to check out early," I I said. My voice sounded raw. Room number? He asked, barely looking up. 1215. His fingers stilled over the keyboard. His posture shifted, ever so slightly. I saw it. I saw the moment he realized something wasn't right. He lifted his gaze, studying me carefully. That room, he hesitated. That room hasn't been booked for a long time. My stomach dropped. That's not possible, I said, my voice weaker now. I was just there. Another glance at his co-worker. A silent exchange. And then carefully, like he wasn't sure he should tell me, he said, that room has been closed off for months. A cold, hollow feeling spread through me. I thought about the reflection. The way it had stared. The way it hadn't moved until it wanted to. I placed the key on the counter with a shaking hand and left without another word. As I stepped outside into the morning air, I caught a glimpse of myself in the hotel's glass doors. For a second, just a second, my reflection was still smiling. The receptionist hesitated. Just for a second. If I hadn't been so exhausted from the 8-hour drive, I might have noticed it sooner. The way her fingers clenched around the keycard, how her eyes flicked toward the manager standing behind her, like she was silently asking if she should say something. But then she forced a smile, slid the card across the desk, and said, "You'll be in room 308. I picked it up. Thanks. She hesitated again. Then, in a lower voice, she said, "If anything feels off, just come back downstairs." I frowned. Off how? A pause. A nervous glance. Then, strange things happened there. I chuckled. Like what? Haunted. She didn't laugh. "Just don't open the closet," she said. I smirked, gave her a little salute, and headed toward the elevator. I should have listened. The elevator dinged as I stepped onto the 3rd floor. The hallway was long, dimly lit, lined with identical wooden doors, each bearing a brass number. 308 was at the very end. I passed by room 306. A strange odor hit me. Something stale, like damp fabric and cigarette smoke, even though the hotel had a no-smoking policy. The light in front of room 308 flickered weakly. The keycard slid through the lock with a faint beep, and the door swung open. The room was too quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of a normal hotel room. This was different, an absence of sound, like the air had been sucked out. The bed was neatly made, pillows stacked perfectly. The window was closed, curtains drawn. A desk sat in the corner with a chair that looked like no one had ever used it. The closet door was slightly ajar. I thought about the receptionist's warning and rolled my eyes. Great. The power of suggestion had already planted itself in my brain. I walked over and shut the closet door. Click. The lock slid into place. Satisfied, I tossed my duffel bag onto the bed, kicked off my shoes, and turned on the TV. Everything was fine. Until midnight. I woke up to hissing. At first, I thought it was part of a dream, a soft, whispering static like radio interference. But as my mind clawed its way to wakefulness, I realized it wasn't in my head. The TV had turned on by itself. White noise filled the screen, flickering, shifting. Shadows seemed to move within the static, twisting and writhing, like something trying to form a shape. I grabbed the remote and turned it off. The room went silent. I exhaled. Then, creak. My body tensed. That sound hadn't come from the TV. It had come from inside the room. I turned my head slowly, my heart pounding against my ribs. The bathroom door was open. I was sure I had closed it before bed. The darkness inside was impossibly deep, like a yawning void instead of a small hotel bathroom. A wave of cold air slithered out, prickling against my skin. I sat up, throat dry. I should have gotten dressed. I should have packed my bags. I should have left right then. Instead, I forced my legs to move. I stepped toward the bathroom, my pulse hammering. Click. I flicked on the light. Nothing. A sink, a toilet, a shower. All normal. Exactly how I left it. I let out a shaky breath, laughing at myself. Jesus. I was letting that front desk woman get in my head. I turned, and someone was sitting on my bed, my breath locked in my throat. A woman. Thin. Unnaturally pale. Black, stringy hair clung to her hollow cheeks. Her head tilted slightly, almost curious, as if she were studying me. And her eyes. Black pits. Bottomless. Hollow. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, her posture unnervingly stiff. Her dry lips were parted slightly, as if she had just tried to speak. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. She blinked once, slowly, deliberately. Then she smiled. It was the wrong kind of smile. Lips stretching too wide. Teeth yellowed and uneven. A smile that wasn't meant to be on a human face. Something inside me snapped. I turned and ran. The front desk clerk looked up, startled, as I reached the lobby. I must have looked insane, barefoot, breathing hard, my face twisted with panic. I need to check out, I stammered. Her expression darkened. She nodded quickly, no questions asked. As she processed my checkout, she murmured, "You looked." I swallowed hard. "What?" She lifted her gaze, her expression unreadable. "You looked in the closet, didn't you?" My stomach twisted into knots. I didn't," I whispered. "I swear." She held my gaze for a long time. Then, finally, she slid the receipt across the counter. "Good," she said quietly. I grabbed my bag and walked out into the night without looking back. I was shaking by the time I reached my car. I fumbled with my keys, breath coming in shallow gasps. I needed to go. Now, as I climbed into the driver's seat, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face was pale, eyes bloodshot. I looked like someone who had just seen a ghost. And then, behind me in the back seat, she was there, grinning. I screamed, spun around. Nothing. The back seat was empty, but my skin crawled. I didn't waste time. I slammed the car into reverse and sped out of the parking lot, the hotel shrinking in my rearview mirror. I drove all night, not stopping until the sun started rising. Only then did I pull over, hands shaking as I wiped the sweat from my face. I told myself it was just my imagination, that I was just tired, paranoid, that there was no woman, no whispering, no eyes watching me from the dark. But later, after I checked into a different hotel, I pulled out my duffel bag, and inside, buried beneath my clothes, was a single strand of long black hair. The ringing tore me from sleep, a sharp, jarring sound in the silent, unfamiliar room. I blinked, disoriented, my mind still thick with exhaustion. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. The long stretch of highway, the endless drive, the neon vacancy sign blinking through my windshield. Right. The motel. The kind of place that smelled like old carpet and cigarette smoke, where the front desk clerk barely looked up from his crossword as he handed over my key. The phone rang again. A shrill, old-school landline ring. I sat up, rubbing a hand over my face, and squinted at the glowing red numbers on the nightstand. 3:12 a.m. I hesitated. Nothing good ever happens at 3:12 a.m. I reached for the receiver, my fingers unsteady. "Hello." For a long moment, there was nothing. Then, a whisper. Soft, almost breathless. "Get out." A chill crawled down my spine. "Who is this?" My voice came out rough, still thick with sleep. Click. Silence. I stared at the phone for a few seconds before setting it back in the cradle. Just a prank. Had to be. Some drunk messing around with the motel's phone system. Still, something felt off. The air in the room seemed colder than before. The shadows stretched a little longer. I shook it off, rolling over, trying to ignore the unease curling in my stomach. It was nothing. Had to be nothing. Then the phone rang again. Louder this time. More urgent. I froze. The digital clock still read 3:12 a.m. A lump of dread formed in my throat. I reached for the receiver, slower now. My fingers felt numb as I lifted it to my ear. "Hello." Silence. And then the same whisper. Only this time, the words were different. "He's in your room." Ice spread through my veins. I sat up fast, my heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. I turned on the bedside lamp. The weak yellow light flooded the room. Nothing looked out of place. Except the closet door. It was open. Just an inch. I knew it had been shut when I went to bed. I stared at the dark crack, my breath shallow. The air felt heavier now, thick and wrong, like something unseen had filled the space around me. Then, a soft creak. From inside the closet. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Something was in there. Watching me. The silence in the room stretched, pressing in on my ears like thick cotton. Then I heard it. A breath. Slow. Deliberate. Not mine. The kind of breath that was meant to be heard. The kind that lets you know you're not alone. Something inside me screamed to move, to run. I grabbed my bag from the chair, barely registering the way it knocked over a plastic cup from the bedside table. The sound of it hitting the floor made me flinch. I bolted for the door, yanking it open so hard it slammed against the wall. I didn't look back, didn't check the closet, didn't care about the thing that might have been stepping out into the light. I ran, down the silent hallway, past the empty front desk, out into the cold night air. I fumbled with my keys, my breath coming in short gasps, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the door open. I threw my bag into the passenger seat, started the car, and peeled out of the parking lot. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. Didn't want to see if anything was standing in that doorway. I drove. For hours. Long enough for the sun to rise. Long enough for the motel to feel like a distant nightmare. It had to be a prank. Some freak messing with the guests. That's what I told myself as I checked into a different motel that morning. Exhausted but unable to sleep. Then my phone rang. My cell phone. I stared at it, my pulse picking up again. I answered. Hello. A pause. Sir, this is the front desk from the motel you stayed at last night. My stomach twisted. We noticed you left suddenly, the woman continued, her voice careful. Is everything all right? I hesitated. Yeah, I lied. I just had to leave. Another pause. Then her voice lowered. Sir, did you receive any phone calls last night? The bottom of my stomach dropped out. I swallowed. Yeah, I said slowly. 2 of them. A long, heavy silence. Then she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. Sir, there are no call records from your room. I felt my skin prickle. No one dialed in. No one dialed out. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Then she added, almost hesitantly, that room hasn't had a working phone in years. I hung up, and I kept driving. I should have never taken the damn elevator. I should have listened to the desk clerk. It was late, past midnight, and I was exhausted when I checked into the hotel. One of those high-rise, corporate-looking places where the walls are beige, the carpets smell like industrial cleaner, and the lighting is always a little too dim. The kind of place where people come and go without a second thought, just passing through on their way to somewhere else. I had been driving all day, my back aching from hours on the road. I just needed a bed, a few hours of sleep, and then I'd be back on the highway by morning. The guy at the front desk barely looked up as he handed me my key card. Room 607, he said. Then, just as I turned to leave, he added, and, just go straight to your floor. I paused. What? He cleared his throat, shifting in his seat. Just don't press 5. I let out a tired laugh, waiting for him to tell me it was a joke. He didn't. He just looked at me, then quickly went back to his computer like he didn't want to say anything else. Now, any sane person would have let it go. But I was tired. My brain was running on fumes. And something about the way he said it, the way his voice tightened just a little, it bothered me. I should have listened. I should have gone straight to my room, locked the door, and gone to sleep. But I didn't. Instead, when I stepped into the elevator and hit the button for 6, I hesitated. And then, without thinking, without meaning to, I pressed 5. The moment I did, I felt it. A shift. The soft hum of the elevator turned hollow, like I was suddenly moving through a deeper space. The air in the elevator thickened, just slightly, like the pressure had changed. I shook off the feeling. Just my imagination. Just exhaustion playing tricks on me. The numbers above the door lit up. 2, 3, 4, 5. The doors slid open, and everything was wrong. The hallway beyond the doors was dark. Not dimly lit like the rest of the hotel. This was pitch black. A suffocating void. I squinted, trying to make out anything in the gloom, but it was like staring into a bottomless pit. The air smelled different, too stale, damp, and rotten, like old wood left to decay. Something about the silence set my teeth on edge. It was too quiet. And then I felt it. A presence. Watching me. Not from the hallway. From above. I swallowed hard, the hair on my arms prickling. I tilted my head up, and my breath caught in my throat. The ceiling was too high. Far too high, stretching upward into darkness, like the hotel had grown an impossible extra dimension. And hanging there, barely visible in the gloom, were fingers. Long, thin fingers curled over the edge of the ceiling. Gripping. Something was up there. Something was watching me. The silence deepened. The air thickened, pressing against my skin. A slow, skittering sound echoed from above. I slammed the closed door button so hard my thumb went numb. The doors shuttered. The light inside the elevator flickered. And then, a sound, like something dropping down from the ceiling. The doors slid shut just as something hit the floor outside. I heard it. I heard it crawl toward me. A wet, dragging sound, as if something with too many limbs was pulling itself across the floor. Then, a whisper. Low, raspy, hungry. You pressed 5. The elevator rocketed upward. The light dimmed, pulsing like a dying bulb. I pressed myself against the back wall, heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. And then ding! The doors opened. Floor 6. The hallway was bright. Normal. Like nothing had happened. But I knew better. I ran. I ran down the hall, keycard shaking in my hand as I fumbled for my door. Room 607. The lock clicked. I shoved the door open, rushed inside, and slammed it shut behind me. I locked it, then double-locked it. I shoved a chair under the handle for good measure. The room was silent. Safe. But my skin still crawled. I checked the closet. The bathroom. Under the bed. Nothing. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me. I sat on the bed, pressing my back against the headboard, my ears straining for any sound. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that it was just a creepy hallway, a weird trick of the light, that the whisper I had heard was just the elevator's old speakers crackling. I kept telling myself that over and over, until sometime deep in the night, there was a knock. Not at my door, not from the hallway, from inside the closet. A slow, deliberate tap. 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 I stopped breathing. The chair under the door handle shifted slightly, as if something had brushed against the other side. And then, a whisper. You pressed 5. I didn't sleep. I stayed awake, back pressed against the headboard, clutching the keycard in my fist like it was a weapon. The knocking didn't come again, but I felt it. I felt something waiting on the other side of the door. When dawn finally broke, when the first light seeped through the thin hotel curtains, I grabbed my bag and left. I didn't shower, didn't pack properly. I just ran. I didn't even check out. As I reached my car, I turned back one last time, glancing up at the windows of the hotel. And for just a second, I thought I saw a shape standing in the window of my room. A dark figure. Tall. Motionless. Watching me. I peeled out of the parking lot, heart pounding in my chest, and I didn't stop driving for hours. I didn't think about it. I didn't talk about it. And I never, ever stayed in that hotel again. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, when I'm lying in bed, eyes shut, drifting towards sleep, I hear it. That slow, deliberate tap. 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 And a whisper. Right beside my ear. You pressed 5.